Evelyn Brooks had always been a calm and gentle woman. At 64, she carried herself with quiet confidence, the kind that didn't need to be shown off. Her smile was soft, her words polite, and her eyes full of kindness. That morning, she dressed neatly in a cream-colored coat, gold earrings, and a simple pearl necklace her late husband had given her. She was flying to Los Angeles to visit her grandchildren, something she had looked forward to all week. When Evelyn arrived at the airport, she moved with grace through the busy crowd. The staff at check-in smiled at her as she handed them her first-class ticket. She had never been the kind of woman to brag, but this flight was special. Her son, Marcus Brooks, had insisted she travel comfortably. Marcus wasn't just any son. He was the CEO of one of the largest tech companies in the country. But Evelyn never used his name for special treatment. To her, kindness and respect were earned by how you treated people, not by money or titles. She reached the gate early, holding her boarding pass tightly. The announcement came. First-class passengers may now board. Evelyn smiled, walked forward, and showed her ticket. The gate agent nodded and welcomed her aboard. Everything seemed normal. Inside the aircraft, the first-class cabin was beautiful. Wide leather seats, soft lighting, and the quiet hum of music. Evelyn's seat was by the window. She placed her purse gently on the side table and sat down with a sigh of relief. For a moment she looked out at the runway and smiled. Marcus would be proud I made it on time, she whispered softly to herself. But her peace didn't last long. A young flight attendant walked by, giving her a quick glance. Then another came, frowning slightly. The two exchanged looks, whispering to each other near the galley. Evelyn pretended not to notice, adjusting her seatbelt. After a minute, the first attendant approached her with a stiff smile. "Ma'am," the woman said politely, "are you sure you're in the right seat?" Evelyn blinked, confused. "Yes, dear. This is 2A. That's what my ticket says." She handed over the boarding pass. The attendant scanned it and frowned again. "This is a first-class seat, ma'am. Maybe you meant to book business or economy?" Evelyn smiled kindly. "No, I believe this is correct. My son booked it for me." The attendant gave her a look. One of disbelief, the kind people give when they've already decided you don't belong. She nodded quickly, muttering, "Let me check," and walked away. Evelyn's stomach felt tight. She wasn't used to being questioned like that. A few minutes later, the head flight attendant arrived, taller, older, with a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ma'am," she said sharply, "we have a problem. This seat is for first-class passengers. You'll have to move back to economy." Evelyn's cheeks warmed with embarrassment. People were now looking. A man across the aisle raised an eyebrow. Another woman whispered something to her husband. Evelyn's voice trembled slightly. "There must be a mistake. My son booked this seat for me. Please check again." The head attendant sighed impatiently. "Ma'am, we've already checked. Please don't make this difficult." The tone cut through Evelyn's heart. She had been polite, calm, respectful, yet she was being treated like a nuisance. Slowly, she unbuckled her belt. "All right," she said softly, "if that's what you need." As she stood, she could feel dozens of eyes on her. She could almost hear the unspoken judgment, as if her skin color, her modest clothes, and her quiet manner somehow made her less deserving of that seat. The humiliation burned inside her, but she kept her chin up. A younger man in the row behind her suddenly spoke. "Excuse me, I saw her ticket. It said first class. Why are you moving her?" The attendant glared at him. "Sir, please mind your own seat." He looked around in disbelief. "No, this isn't right," but no one else spoke up. The silence in the cabin was heavy. Evelyn gave the young man a grateful smile and whispered, "It's fine, dear. Thank you." Her voice was steady, though her heart was breaking. She gathered her purse and began the long walk down the aisle toward economy. Each step felt heavier than the last. She didn't cry, not yet. But inside she felt small, invisible. When she finally sat in the crowded economy section, a woman next to her smiled kindly. "You all right, ma'am?" Evelyn nodded, forcing a weak smile. "Just a misunderstanding, I suppose." But deep down she knew it wasn't. Meanwhile, in first class, the young man who had spoken up quietly pulled out his phone and checked the video he had recorded. It clearly showed Evelyn being told to move despite her valid ticket. He hesitated for a moment, then uploaded it to social media with a caption, "They kicked an elderly woman out of first class because they didn't believe she belonged there." As the plane took off, Evelyn looked out of the tiny window, her reflection faint against the clouds. She whispered softly, "Marcus, I hope you're doing well. My boy." She didn't know that far away in a tall glass office building, her son, the powerful CEO, was about to see that same video, and when he did, everything would change. Evelyn sat quietly in her cramped economy seat trying to steady her breathing. The hum of the airplane surrounded her, but her mind was far away. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the edge of her purse. She didn't want anyone to see how much the moment had hurt her. She kept her face calm, but inside, she felt like something inside her had cracked. All her life, Evelyn had taught her son Marcus that dignity was something no one could take from you, unless you gave it away. But right now she wasn't sure if she believed that. The humiliation had been too public, too sharp. It wasn't about losing a seat. It was about being seen as less, as someone who didn't belong, no matter how kind or gentle she was. Up in first class, the young man who had recorded the video kept glancing toward the curtain that separated the cabins. He couldn't believe what he had witnessed. He replayed the video again, Evelyn's calm, respectful tone, the attendant's harsh words, the uneasy silence of the passengers who did nothing. It made his stomach twist. After a few seconds of hesitation, he uploaded it to his social media page with a caption, "Unbelievable. They kicked this sweet old lady out of first class because she didn't look like she belonged. Disgusting." The plane continued its flight. Hours passed. Evelyn tried to distract herself by looking out the window, but her mind kept returning to the humiliation. Every time the flight attendants passed by her row, she felt her chest tighten. None of them looked her in the eye. They acted like she didn't exist. She quietly declined the in-flight meal, saying she wasn't hungry, though her stomach growled softly. A little girl sitting across the aisle peeked at her. "Are you okay, lady?" the child asked innocently. Evelyn smiled faintly. "I'm all right, sweetheart. Thank you." The little girl's mother gave a polite nod, sensing something had happened. Evelyn turned back toward the window, letting the soft roar of the engines fill her ears. Meanwhile, the young man's post was spreading fast. Within hours, the video gathered hundreds of thousands of views. People were furious. Comments poured in from all over. "This is heartbreaking. Unacceptable behavior. Who treats an old woman like that?" By the time the plane began its descent into Los Angeles, the video had already gone viral. Journalists were sharing it, influencers were reacting, and hashtags like #Justice for Evelyn and #Darshern first-class discrimination were trending. But Evelyn didn't know any of that. When the wheels touched down, she simply sighed in relief. The flight was over. She just wanted to get home, hug her grandchildren, and forget this day ever happened. When the plane stopped, the seatbelt sign went off, and passengers began to stand. As Evelyn reached for her bag, she heard whispers behind her. "That's the woman from the video." "Yeah, she's the one they kicked out." Evelyn turned slightly, confused. But before she could ask, the same young man approached her. He looked nervous but determined. "Ma'am," he said quietly, I just want to say I'm sorry for what happened." "It wasn't right." Evelyn gave him a warm, tired smile. "Thank you, dear. You were kind to speak up." He hesitated, then added, "People are talking about it. A lot. The video went online. Everyone's supporting you." She frowned slightly. "Video?" "Yes," he said. "I recorded what they did. I thought people needed to see it." "I hope that's okay." Evelyn blinked in surprise. "Oh my." She didn't know what to say. She wasn't someone who liked attention, but maybe, just maybe, this would show others how wrong that kind of behavior was. As she walked out of the plane, her heart still ached, but she held her head high. She was still Evelyn Brooks, mother, teacher, and a woman who had always believed in quiet strength. She didn't raise her voice, but her silence carried dignity that no one could erase. At the baggage claim, she waited for her suitcase, unaware that her name and face were already on millions of phone screens around the world. Reporters were beginning to tag airlines, calling for statements. People wanted answers. Meanwhile, far across the city, inside a tall glass building, Marcus Brooks was sitting in a conference room, reviewing numbers on a tablet when his assistant rushed in. "Sir," she said breathlessly, "you need to see this." Marcus frowned. "What is it?" She handed him her phone. It's trending everywhere. Saw justice for Evelyn. He clicked the video. The first few seconds were blurry. A shaky shot of an older woman sitting quietly. Then came the voice of the attendant. "Ma'am, this seat is for first-class passengers." And Evelyn's calm reply, "I believe I have the right ticket, dear." Marcus froze. His eyes widened. The air in the room seemed to stop moving. The woman in the video, the one being humiliated in front of strangers, was his mother. "Where was this?" he asked in a low voice. "Flight 247 from New York to Los Angeles. Landed an hour ago," the assistant replied softly. Marcus stood up slowly. He didn't shout. He didn't throw anything, but there was a look in his eyes, on a mix of pain, anger, and something colder. The kind of look that came from a man used to power, but wounded by something deeply personal. He walked to the window, staring at the skyline. "Find out which airline," he said quietly, "and who was on that crew." "Yes, sir." He didn't move for a long moment. He just stood there looking out at the city. For the first time in years, Marcus wasn't thinking about business, profits, or deals. He was thinking about his mother, sitting alone in a crowded seat, treated like she didn't matter, and in that silent office high above the city, he made a promise to himself. This wasn't going to end quietly. By the time the plane landed and the passengers scattered into the busy terminal, the world had already seen Evelyn Brooks. Her face, calm but hurt, had appeared on millions of screens before she even reached the exit gate. The young man's short clip had taken off like wildfire. At first, it was just a few hundred views. Then thousands. Then hundreds of thousands. People shared it with angry captions. How could anyone treat her like that? "This woman deserves an apology. I hope her son finds out what they did." By the time Evelyn reached her daughter's car outside the airport, the video had already hit 3 million views. Reporters were tagging the airline's official account, demanding answers. The internet had turned one woman's humiliation into a global story of injustice. Evelyn had no idea. In the car, her daughter, Denise, noticed her mother's quietness. "Mom, are you okay? You're so quiet. You look tired." Evelyn gave a weak smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart." "It was just an unpleasant flight," Denise frowned. "Unpleasant? What happened?" "Nothing important," Evelyn said softly, staring out of the window. "Let's just get home." But Denise knew something was wrong. Her mother wasn't the type to complain, so if she said nothing, it usually meant something big. While they drove through the traffic, across town in a glass-walled skyscraper, Marcus Brooks was still staring at his screen. He hadn't moved in minutes. He had watched the video 3 times now. Each time he hoped it would change, that maybe he had misunderstood. But no. The video showed exactly what he feared. His mother being treated like she didn't belong, like she wasn't worthy of respect. The CEO of Brooks Technologies, one of the most powerful tech companies in the country, sat in silence. His jaw was tight. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from anger. His assistant stood nearby, unsure what to say. "Sir, it's everywhere. The news channels are already picking it up. People are demanding an apology from the airline." Marcus didn't answer. He just kept looking at the image of his mother, holding her purse, standing quietly while people looked away. Finally, he spoke, his voice calm, but his tone cutting like steel. "Call the head of PR. I want the full details." "Which airline? Which staff? Everything." The assistant nodded and rushed out. Marcus leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. He could still remember being a little boy, sitting in the back seat of their old car while his mother drove him to school, saying, "Marcus, don't ever think you're better than someone else, but don't let anyone treat you like you're less either." He opened his eyes. "You raised me better than them, Mom," he muttered softly. That evening, the news exploded. Television anchors replayed the clip over and over. Commentators debated it. Social media was flooded with hashtags. "Justice for Evelyn," "Respect has no class," "First-class discrimination," influencers made videos about it, celebrities tweeted support, and ordinary people sent messages of love and apology to the woman they'd never met but already admired. Somewhere in her small living room, Evelyn sat watching TV with her daughter. The news anchor's voice said, "The woman in the viral video, identified as Mrs. Evelyn Brooks, was reportedly traveling on Flight 247 from New York to Los Angeles when she was asked to leave her first-class seat. The airline has not yet issued a statement, Denise gasped. Mom, that's you. Evelyn's eyes widened. She put her hand to her mouth. Oh dear. I didn't know someone recorded that. Her daughter turned to her. This is everywhere. People are furious, Mom. Everyone's talking about it. Evelyn shook her head, overwhelmed. I didn't want trouble. I just wanted to go home. But the trouble had already started, and it was bigger than she could imagine. That night, Marcus arrived at his mother's house. When Evelyn opened the door and saw his face, she froze. His expression was calm, too calm, and his eyes were dark with anger. Marcus, she said softly. You saw it? Yes, Mom, I saw it. She looked down, embarrassed. It's not worth your time. These things happen, he interrupted firmly. No, they don't, not like this. Not to you. He stepped inside, setting his phone on the table. You were treated like a criminal for sitting in the seat you paid for. That's not a mistake. That's humiliation. Evelyn sighed, her voice gentle. Don't do anything rash, son. I don't want to make a scene. Marcus gave a faint smile, the kind that hid something dangerous behind it. I won't make a scene, Mom. I'll make a statement. He walked toward the window, looking out at the quiet street. You taught me respect. You told me to stand tall, to speak when others can't. Well, it's time to return the lesson. Evelyn watched him, torn between pride and fear. She knew that look. It was the same look he had when he built his company from nothing, when everyone said he couldn't do it because of where he came from. And he proved them wrong. Now that same fire burned in his eyes again. That night, as Evelyn went to bed, she prayed for calm, not realizing that her story was no longer just hers. It had become a symbol of something far greater: power, dignity, and justice. And miles away in the city's tallest office tower, Marcus Brooks was already making phone calls, quiet, controlled, and precise. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. But everyone who answered felt the weight of his voice when he said, "This is Marcus Brooks. I want to talk about what your airline did to my mother." The next morning, the world would wake up to headlines that no one saw coming. The story was no longer about a seat. It was about respect, and Marcus was about to make sure the whole world remembered his mother's name. The next morning, the city woke up to chaos. News channels couldn't stop replaying the same clip: an elderly woman being forced out of her first-class seat while people watched in silence. The clip had now crossed 20 million views overnight. Every major media outlet had a headline about it. And the world wanted one thing: justice. Inside a tall glass building in downtown Chicago, the headquarters of Brooks Technologies was unusually quiet. Marcus Brooks arrived early, dressed in a charcoal suit, his face unreadable. Everyone in the office knew something serious was about to happen. His assistant, Clara, followed him nervously, carrying a tablet filled with report statements and trending posts. "Sir," she said softly, "the video has reached every major outlet. CNN, BBC, everyone's covering it. The airline just released a short statement calling it an unfortunate misunderstanding." Marcus stopped walking. "A misunderstanding?" he repeated slowly. His tone was calm, but his eyes were cold. "They humiliated my mother in front of strangers, and they call it that?" Clara didn't reply. She knew better. Marcus entered his office and shut the door behind him. The room was quiet, only the faint hum of the city outside. He stood by the window, staring out at the skyline. For years, this view had represented success, power, hard work. But today, all of it felt empty. He picked up his phone and scrolled through the video again. Every second felt heavier. His mother's soft, respectful voice, the flight attendant's tone, the silence from everyone else. He paused on one frame, Evelyn standing in the aisle, clutching her purse, her eyes full of quiet pain. Something in his chest tightened. "They don't know who they did this to," he whispered. He sat down at his desk, took a deep breath, and dialed a number only a few people had. The line clicked. "Robert Hayes speaking," came a deep voice. "Robert," Marcus said evenly. "This is Marcus Brooks." The airline CEO hesitated. "Marcus, of course. I assume this is about the incident." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Incident? That's what you call it." Robert's voice shifted, nervous. "Marcus, please, you have to understand it was a mistake. We're investigating. Your staff humiliated a 64-year-old woman. My mother. Marcus interrupted, his voice sharp now. They looked at her and decided she didn't belong there. Tell me, Robert, how many other people have they treated like that? There was silence on the other end. Marcus continued, his tone calm but dangerous. I've spent years building a company that treats everyone with respect. Janitors, executives, customers. You can replace parts in a machine, Robert, but you can't replace a reputation once it's broken. And yours, he said, pausing, is about to shatter. Marcus, please let us handle this internally, Robert said quickly. We'll discipline the staff, issue a proper apology. Marcus's laugh was soft, but it carried power. You think an apology will fix this? You embarrassed the wrong woman. My mother doesn't want revenge, but I do. Marcus. I'm terminating our partnership, Marcus said coldly. The $200 million deal we were finalizing with your airline is off. Effective immediately. There was a stunned silence. Marcus, wait. Be reasonable. I am being reasonable, Marcus said, voice steady as steel. Reasonable people expect respect. You failed to give it. He hung up. The sound of the phone disconnecting echoed through the office like a gunshot. Marcus leaned forward, exhaled slowly, then pressed another button on his desk. Clara, get my PR team. I want a statement drafted within the hour. Yes, sir. What should it say? He looked out the window again, eyes distant. Simple, direct, no names. Just this. Respect has no price tag. An hour later, that sentence appeared on every major social media platform, posted from Marcus's official account. The words were powerful. Underneath them was a black and white photo of Evelyn smiling softly, holding a cup of tea. The internet went wild. He's her son? The CEO? He canceled a $200 million deal because of her treatment. That's what you call loyalty. Respect, period. News anchors repeated the story in disbelief. Business analysts debated it live on air. Some called it bold. Others called it personal. But one thing was clear. Marcus Brooks had just made a global statement without shouting a single word. Meanwhile, Evelyn sat in her living room, unaware of how much noise her son had made. She only saw the growing pile of messages and interview requests. When Marcus arrived that evening, she looked at him with tired eyes. Marcus, what did you do? She asked softly. He smiled faintly. What I had to. People are calling, reporters keep asking questions. He sat beside her and took her hand. Mom, they tried to take your dignity. I just gave it back. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment, her eyes glistening. I didn't want revenge, son. I just wanted to be treated like a person. He nodded. And now the world knows that, she sighed. Marcus, promise me you won't let anger drive you. He smiled sadly. It's not anger, Mom, it's justice. She didn't reply, but she squeezed his hand, proud and heartbroken at the same time. Outside, cameras were gathering near their gate. The world wanted to see the woman who had unknowingly changed the conversation about power, prejudice, and respect. And upstairs, Marcus's phone buzzed again. Dozens of messages from CEOs, politicians, and journalists. But he ignored them all. For the first time in years, Marcus Brooks didn't feel like the most powerful man in the city. He just felt like a son, defending his mother's honor, and the world was about to see just how far he was willing to go. The morning after Marcus's post, the world wasn't just watching, and it was demanding answers. Every major news outlet ran the story of the black executive who stood up for his mother. Hashtags flooded the internet. Respect has no price tag. Justice for Evelyn. Brooks vs. Airline. The airline's PR team was drowning in outrage. Calls from journalists never stopped. Investors were panicking. The company's stock price had already dropped 5% in a single day. In a glass meeting room on the 30th floor of the airline's headquarters, tension filled the air. Executives sat stiffly, eyes fixed on a large screen that showed the viral video. Evelyn Brooks standing quietly while being told to move to economy. The CEO, Robert Hayes, stood at the front of the room, pale and exhausted. This is a disaster, he muttered, rubbing his forehead. The internet's tearing us apart. The public wants accountability, and Marcus Brooks just destroyed our partnership deal. One of the board members spoke nervously. Sir, the crew's insisting it was a misunderstanding. They claim they were following procedure. Robert turned sharply. Procedure? Is public humiliation a new part of our policy? His voice rose for the first time in hours. This isn't just about one flight attendant. This is about our reputation. We're supposed to represent professionalism. Instead, we look like villains. He slammed his hand on the table. I want an investigation started immediately. Every crew member on that flight, every witness, every piece of footage. I want names, statements, and results. Within hours, the airline's internal affairs department began gathering details. Emails were sent. Phone calls were made. The entire flight crew of Flight 247 was placed on temporary suspension. Meanwhile, in his own office, Marcus watched it all unfold quietly. He wasn't celebrating. He didn't smile. He simply observed. His assistant, Clara, entered the room holding a folder. The media is still on fire, sir. The airline has officially launched an investigation. They've grounded the entire crew from your mother's flight. Marcus nodded slowly. Good, but that's not enough. Clara hesitated. What do you mean? Marcus looked up. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried the kind of determination that could shake entire companies. They need to understand this isn't just about an old woman being disrespected. This is about every person who's been quietly mistreated and never had someone to fight for them. He leaned forward. I want our PR team to issue another statement. Something that makes them listen. Clara took notes quickly. What should it say? Marcus looked out the window at the city skyline, where sunlight gleamed off the skyscrapers. Tell them. This isn't about wealth or status. It's about decency. It's about the kind of world we're building for our children. Write it like that. Across town, Evelyn sat on her porch with a cup of tea, watching the afternoon sky. The world around her had changed overnight, and she could feel it. Neighbors waved to her as they passed. Strangers dropped by just to say kind words. Mrs. Brooks, one woman said, You're so brave. You didn't deserve what happened. Evelyn smiled kindly, though her eyes were tired. Thank you, dear. I didn't do anything brave. I just stayed quiet. The woman shook her head. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words. Evelyn thought about that for a moment. Maybe she was right, still part of her worried. She didn't like all the attention. She never wanted to be famous, she only wanted respect. She didn't know that her quiet strength had become a symbol of grace and power for millions. Back at the airline, the investigation was uncovering uncomfortable truths. Witnesses confirmed that Evelyn had a valid first-class ticket. The crew had made assumption, nothing more. One internal email from the crew chief leaked online. We thought she was lost. She didn't look like a first-class passenger. That single line spread like fire. The world erupted again. Talk shows discussed it, politicians commented on it, and civil rights organizations demanded reforms. Robert Hayes, the airline CEO, felt the ground crumbling beneath him. He called his communications director in frustration. Get Marcus Brooks on the phone. We need to fix this before it kills us. The director looked uneasy. Sir, he's not answering any of our calls. Robert's voice dropped to a whisper. Then go to him. Beg if you have to. That evening, Marcus was in his mother's home again. The lights were dim, the air quiet. Evelyn sat beside him on the couch watching a news segment replaying the story. Marcus, she said softly, you didn't have to do all this. He looked at her gently. Yes, I did. They embarrassed you because they thought they could. That's not something I can let pass, she sighed. The world can be cruel, son, but don't let their cruelty change your heart. Marcus smiled faintly. Don't worry, Mom, my heart's still in the right place. I just have louder tools. Just then, his phone buzzed. A message popped up, a news alert. Airline CEO requests urgent meeting with Marcus Brooks following viral investigation. Evelyn looked at the screen. Are you going to meet him? Marcus's gaze hardened. Oh, I'll meet him. But not to listen, to remind him that some things can't be bought or fixed with words. He stood up, buttoned his jacket, and looked at his mother. Tomorrow the truth won't just come out. It'll be heard. Evelyn watched him go, a mix of pride and worry in her heart. Her son wasn't just fighting for her. He was fighting for something bigger. Outside, the world was buzzing with headlines and hashtags, but in that quiet house, a single truth echoed louder than any noise. When respect is stolen, silence is not an option, and Marcus Brooks was about to make the world remember that. The next morning arrived with a strange silence in the city, the kind that comes before something big happens. Marcus Brooks sat in the back of a black car, his reflection staring back from the tinted window. He wasn't thinking about business today. He wasn't the CEO heading into another meeting. Today he was a son, and the world was watching. The car stopped in front of the airline's headquarters, a tall silver tower that now stood as a symbol of shame. Dozens of cameras flashed as soon as Marcus stepped out. Reporters shouted questions, microphones pushed forward, flashes blinding him as he walked calmly through the crowd. "Mr. Brooks, are you planning to sue the airline? Did your mother know about your decision? What do you want from the company?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence was stronger than any statement. Inside, the top executives were already waiting in the boardroom, nervous, tense, and pale. The air smelled of coffee, fear, and guilt. At the far end of the table sat Robert Hayes, the airline's CEO. He stood up when Marcus entered, extending a hand. "Marcus," Robert said, forcing a polite smile. "Thank you for coming." "Let's talk like professionals." Marcus didn't take his hand. Instead, he slowly set down his phone on the table and pressed play. The sound of the viral video filled the room. Evelyn's soft voice, the attendant's harsh tone, the silence that followed. Everyone watched in shame. When the video ended, Marcus looked up. His voice was calm. "You've all seen this before, I'm sure. But today I want you to feel it." No one spoke. The room was still. Marcus continued. "That woman didn't demand special treatment. She didn't use her name, her son's name, or her status. She bought a ticket like anyone else. And your employees decided she didn't belong there." Robert cleared his throat. "Marcus, we admit it was wrong. The crew has been suspended and we're preparing a public apology." Marcus's eyes met his, sharp and cold. "An apology doesn't erase humiliation. It doesn't take back the look on her face. You didn't just disrespect my mother. You disrespected every person who's ever been judged by appearance instead of worth." One of the board members tried to speak. "Mr. Brooks, we deeply regret." Marcus raised a hand, cutting him off. "You regret getting caught." The silence that followed was heavy. He stood and walked toward the window, looking out over the city skyline. "You know," he said softly, "I was about to finalize a $200 million partnership with your airline. That deal would have helped your brand reach millions more customers." Robert's eyes widened slightly. "Marcus, please. Let's not mix business with emotion." Marcus turned back, his voice low but firm. "When your staff threw my mother out of her seat, you mixed business with prejudice. You did that. Not me." The boardroom was silent again. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioner. Marcus picked up a small remote and pressed another button. A new slide appeared on the big screen, a side-by-side comparison of two images, one of Evelyn being escorted from her seat, and the other of her sitting in her garden, smiling peacefully. "My mother," Marcus said quietly, "raised me alone after my father died. She worked 2 jobs, never complained, never broke the law, never disrespected anyone. She taught me to believe that people earn dignity through honesty and kindness, not money. And yesterday she was treated like she was invisible." He looked directly at Robert. "So tell me, Robert, how do you plan to fix something that isn't broken by policy, but by people?" Robert swallowed hard. "We'll do whatever it takes, Marcus. Training programs, donations, public apologies." Marcus smiled faintly. "Training programs won't teach people to have a heart. But here's what you can do." He picked up a document and slid it across the table. "Effective immediately, I'm withdrawing all contracts, sponsorships, and partnerships with your airline. Brooks Technologies will no longer associate with any company that fails to treat its customers with humanity." Gasps echoed around the room. One executive muttered under his breath, "That's over $200 million. Marcus ignored him. "Money can be earned again. Integrity cannot." He began walking toward the door, but stopped for a moment. "One more thing. The woman you embarrassed and the one you made feel small, she'll never raise her voice against you. But I will. And I'll make sure her silence speaks louder than your excuses." Without another word, he left the room. Outside, reporters were still waiting. The moment Marcus appeared, the questions flew again. "Mr. Brooks, did you reach an agreement? Is the partnership officially canceled?" Marcus paused for a moment, looking straight at the cameras. Then he said clearly, "Respect isn't a luxury. It's a right." The reporters froze. The moment was caught live, replayed across every channel within minutes. Those 6 words became the headline that circled the globe. That evening, the airline released a statement announcing the termination of several staff members and pledging major reforms. But the world already knew this wasn't about business. This was about humanity. At home, Evelyn watched the news, her eyes glistening. When Marcus walked in later, she stood from her chair. "You really did all that?" she asked softly. He smiled gently. "You raised me to fight for what's right." She reached out, placing a hand on his cheek. "You didn't just fight for me, son. You fought for everyone who can't." For a long moment they stood in silence, mother and son surrounded by the quiet hum of justice finally being heard. Outside, the night was calm. But the world had changed. The truth was no longer hidden. And Marcus Brooks had made sure of that. The next morning, the world was buzzing. Marcus Brooks's 6 words, "Respect isn't a luxury. It's a right," were now printed on headlines, quoted on talk shows, and painted on protest signs. The clip of him leaving the boardroom went viral. He hadn't shouted, he hadn't threatened, but his calm confidence had shaken an entire industry. Airline officials scrambled to control the damage, but it was too late. Their reputation was sinking fast. Investors were pulling out, celebrities were tweeting their outrage, and customers were canceling flights. The company's stock continued to drop hour by hour, and in the center of it all was one name: Evelyn Brooks. What started as a moment of humiliation had become a worldwide conversation about dignity, race, and equality. People everywhere were sharing their own stories of discrimination in airports, hotels, offices, and schools. Evelyn's quiet strength had awakened something deep in the hearts of millions. Across social media, new hashtags trended: Evelyn Effect, Respect over Riches, and Brooks Legacy. Meanwhile, inside Marcus's office, the air felt different. His employees looked at him with a mix of pride and awe. For once, he wasn't just their CEO, he was a symbol of courage. Clara, his assistant, entered with a tablet. "Sir, CNN wants to schedule an interview." "So does BBC, and—" Marcus raised a hand gently. "No interviews," she hesitated. "You sure? The whole world wants to hear your side." He looked out the window where the city stretched endlessly. "They've already heard what matters. This isn't about me. It's about her." He turned back to her and smiled faintly. "But I want you to do something else. Organize a foundation and under my mother's name." Clara blinked. "A foundation?" "Yes," Marcus said. "The Evelyn Brooks Foundation for Dignity and Respect. It'll help elderly passengers, single mothers, and people who face discrimination. Every cent that was meant for that airline deal, every dollar, will go there instead." Clara's eyes widened. "That's nearly $200 million. Marcus's voice was steady. "Then it'll be the loudest $200 million they've ever lost." The next day, the announcement hit the internet like lightning. Brooks cancels airline deal, launches $200 foundation in his mother's name. From humiliation to hope. The Evelyn Brooks Foundation changes everything. News anchors described it as the ultimate act of payback with purpose. Marcus hadn't destroyed the airline, he'd outclassed them. He had turned pain into progress. Evelyn sat at home watching the live coverage, her eyes filling with tears as she saw the foundation's logo appear on screen. A golden feather, symbolizing grace with the words, "Dignity for All." Her phone buzzed nonstop with messages from people around the world. "Your son gave us hope. You reminded us to stand tall. You made the world better." But the most touching messages came from strangers who had faced what she had. A grandmother in Texas wrote, "They once made me stand on a bus because they thought I couldn't afford the seat. Your story healed something in me." A student from Africa wrote, "Thank you for showing that silence can be stronger than shouting." Evelyn held her phone against her chest and whispered softly, "Marcus, you did this right." That afternoon, Marcus arrived at her home again, carrying a bouquet of white lilies, her favorite. Evelyn met him at the door, her eyes glowing with pride and love. "Son," she said quietly, "you didn't just fight back. You changed something." Marcus smiled. "Maybe, but it started because you stayed kind when they weren't." She shook her head. "Kindness isn't weakness, Marcus. You reminded the world of that." They sat together on the porch, the sun setting behind them. For a moment, the noise of the world seemed far away. The flashing cameras, the headlines, the chaos. Here it was just mother and son, the air calm and warm. Evelyn took a deep breath. "You know your father would have been proud of you." Marcus looked up at the sky, smiling softly. "I hope so." That night, news spread again, this time of the airline's downfall. The entire crew involved in Evelyn's flight had been fired. The head flight attendant released a public apology in tears, saying she had learned the hardest lesson of her life. The airline's CEO, Robert Hayes, stepped down within a week. Their company's shares hit a record low, but Marcus never said another word about them. He didn't need to. His silence had already spoken for him. Instead, he spent his time helping his mother officially launch the Evelyn Brooks Foundation. The opening event was small but emotional, held in a garden filled with lights and laughter. Dozens of people attended, including those who had once been victims of similar treatment. Evelyn stood at the podium, her voice gentle but firm. "I didn't plan any of this," she said. "I only wanted to be treated kindly, but my son reminded me, and maybe reminded all of us, that silence is powerful when your heart is right. Respect doesn't cost money. It costs humanity." The crowd rose in applause, some wiping tears from their eyes. Marcus stood behind her, proud and quiet, the weight of everything lifting off his shoulders. The humiliation that began in a small airplane cabin had turned into something the world would never forget. It wasn't revenge. It was redemption. As the night ended, Evelyn looked at her son and whispered, "You turned my pain into something beautiful." Marcus smiled, his eyes soft. "No, Mom, you did that just by being you."